Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus here with a review of SH Figuarts' Sailor Moon. This release was a huge deal for a lot of hardcore Moon fans, and I watched the English dub on YTV when I was still in grade school. As such, I hope to inform the noobs, or half-moons as we in the fandom call them, as to the specifics and motivations behind the accessories and overall delivery of this figure. While I may not be as much of a stickler for proportions as the Moon Cores or hardcore Sailor Moon fans, this sculpt looks pretty spot on to me. Her proportions are anime slick, with very few critical breaks in the sculpt for her posability. Small details like cloth creases, skirt pleats, and moonicle accessories are pretty clearly represented, and her head doesn't come off as too flat-looking while still maintaining its anime aesthetic. Her paintwork is similarly strong, with really well-applied applications on the fine details of her costume. The tiny dots on her central bow lock, the small moon on her collar, and the forehead gem of her Moon Princess golden headband are all clear punches of minuscule coloration. What really brings Sailor Moon to life are the various finishes on her larger patches of color. All of the white has a marvelous pearlescent finish, while her blue and cerise applications mix that pearlescent sheen with a dab of metallic shine. It adds a thin but mission-critical extra layer of finesse to give the figure a more premium feel. Finally, and slightly oddly, her pigtails and bangs are cast in a very semi-translucent plastic that gives the impression of a moonlit energy glow. This actually works really well on the pigtails. It's the bangs that come off a little odd and mismatched to the rest of her hair. But enough about hair, let's talk hands. Sailor Moon starts off with some open-splayed hands, and they can be swapped for fists, so that she can ground and pound fools until their face is meat pizza. You know, like in the show. She also has a pair of hands for delivering her signature pose of informing her victim that they're about to get punished into meat pizza. You know, in the name of the moon. Her fourth pair of hands are just some seasoning to the posing pizza pie. One is in a vague pointing gesture, while the other is doing the classic Haichizu maneuver. Her final regular hand is a right hand that can hold her moon stick. There are actually two sticks included, with or without the Zeo crystal installed that gave her access to the morphing grid in that memorable crossover episode. Both versions look great, with sculpt work and paint apps on par with the fine detail of the figure itself. Sailor Moon does have one more hand, another right hand in fact. It's attached to a semi-translucent dome that represents her during her Hisatsu Moon Tiara Tomahawk maneuver. But you cry out, she's still wearing her tiara! Not after you swap her face for the tiara-less variant. Only one of her alternate faces is kitted out for this particular pose, so she's always just frowning sternly whenever she tosses her headband at monsters. Oh right, alternate faces. She has 6 faces in all, and when they're all laid out on the table, they remind me of a night in Calcutta I'd really like to forget. We've already seen her regular slightly cheerful face and tiara-less stern face, and swapping them is a fairly simple affair. You just have to remove her bangs, then carefully tug the flesh from the front of her skull. I'm really happy that this does not involve head removal. Anyway, her other 4 faces start off with a tiara'd version of her stern face. There's also a Hisatsu shouting face, which would have been cool to get without a tiara too. Her final 2 faces are first edition bonus parts, which is a little surprising given how key they are to the whole package. One is a winking face, which is practically made to go with her Haichizu hand option. The other one is a crying face, which is a natural option to add to a Sailor Moon toy, and a terrifying option to use in tandem with a Revoltech Woody. Thankfully, that's a toy I do not own. Rounding out Sailor Moon's box content is Luna, the British jivin' magic cat. She looks very accurate and has a ball-jointed head, though the joint's range is rather limited to pretty much swiveling from left to right. Sailor Moon also comes with a Tamashii stage, but it's a special Tamashii stage. You see, unlike your usual rectangular Tamashii stages, this one is heart-shaped because she's a girl. That's why there's also pink paint deco on it and stuff. It's actually quite helpful, and I really like how it's smaller than the usual Tamashii stage size because it has a smaller shelf footprint. Also, you know, hearts can work for guys, too. We know how to love, how to feel, how to have our one true eye-bow. She is the one named Sailor Moon, and it really helps to have her on her stand. Although, I will say, she doesn't need the stand to stay standing. I'm actually pretty impressed with how solidly she can just be put down and... Whoa! Don't make me embarrassed. Honey. She can stand pretty well, given how, like, tiny her feet are, and how usually I find that SH Figuarts who have tiny feet have a big problem of tipping over thusly. Many times I've put down Sailor Moon and let go and didn't have to catch her again, so good job, Serena. Her head is on a Figuarts free ball joint. There's no hindrance here. The bottom of the neck doesn't actually move. It's all up here in the root where it connects to her jawline. So that means she can't do the Night at the Roxbury thing, and that might ruin the toy for some of you. Her shoulders are nicely unhindered. I was a little bit confused by how the design was going to work at first, but there's a little bit of motion via this sort of modified double barbell ball joint, although this side of the barbell is actually a pin disc universal joint. And it also is kind of her functional bicep swivel. Like the Sentai Figuarts, it's all up here in the sleeve, I guess for the sake of aesthetics. It means that she's not terribly hindered in terms of posing options. As you can see, she can cast a spell real easily, and I haven't found it to really get in the way of what I want to do with her, but I am kind of surprised that this line here isn't just a cut joint. Her elbow has the range of a double hinge joint, but it's actually a kind of Figma style joint almost, with the single disc and pin. Her abular joint can do this, along with her waistular joint. Her abular joint is actually pretty good. In tandem with the waist joint, both these ball joints can get a lot done, and I think that adds a whole lot to the expressiveness of the figure's posing, so she can be all like, what? And then, ah! And what? And ah! Her legs are unimpeded, and I'm really happy to say that, because I went into this hearing that her skirt would get in the way of stuff. Number one, the skirt's pretty flexible. Number two, the skirt has a really nice hidden cut here to allow for pretty much full leg motion. She can't, like, kick up and, like, touch her foot to the top of her head, and I guess that's a bummer for some people. She's got the usual Figuarts system of a swivel down joint, if you so choose, or you can just leave it up there. There's a thigh swivel. There is another one of these deep range single pin disc knee joints. She's got your classic Figuarts foot joint. There's no toe, so that might infuriate some Figuarts regulars. And her final piece of posability, oh, she also has wrists. And I should mention that her hands, especially these open splayed ones she has in the package, come off super easy, and I've actually bumped them off a couple times while posing her. It's a tiny connection there, and it doesn't, like, clip in, so be aware. Now, her pigtails are jointed. They're actually attached via little ball joints into a socket inside the meatball. The meatball is a softer plastic than this stuff, and there have been reports of breakage, and when I got mine, this thing was fused, and basically I heated the meatball part, because that's the soft plastic, and gently worked this thing around until I was able to unstick it. You might not be able to get it unstuck, and if you force it, there's a better chance this is going to snap, because the actual pigtail and the ball of the ball socket joint is made of this more brittle, tough, translucent plastic. However, if you do get them free, they are posable. It's actually a really tight joint because they generally seem to be stuck in the meatball, and it can look like there's wind going on, or that these things are, you know, ambulant. Treat it like a cut swivel, and treat it carefully. That's the one major point of finger-chewing fragility I found on Sailor Moon, and on mine, it was basically fixed. So she's able to fight kaiju and shoot her plasma cannon pretty darn well. And this bodes well for the rest of the Sailor Moon figures if their posability is on par with this one. And I'm glad they got such a good range out of a female anime body. There's not much room to work with in here for joints, and what they got in here is way more functional than them Series 1 pre-cures that me and Rider Strike looked at. Stand for me, honey. Thank you. Thank you. Even though I knew through the grapevine that Anime Girl SH Figuarts had gotten much better since the release of those original pre-cure pieces I looked at with Rider Strike, I was surprised just how solid Sailor Moon feels given her lithe proportions. Sadly, there have been a few reports of fragilities in a couple copies of the toy, but mine's been alright so far, aside from unsticking those pigtail joints. And when I speak of solidity, I mean the basic meat of the figure. Nothing feels floppy, and almost all the parts connections are as solid as any other Figuarts figure. This feels like the Sailor Moon action figure the fan base must have been waiting for all these years. It's easily recommended to any Mooninites, casual or hardcore. Anyway, this has been internet personality Vangelus, and it's worth bookending this with the mention that Bluefin's totally bringing all the Sailor Moon SH Figuarts out domestically. The plan so far is to release all 5 of the original Scouts, but who knows where it'll go from there. Something about tuxedos and masks, chibis, oocyte, Uranus, etc., etc.